Dr. Tanya Cotler, my friend, one of my favorite guests. Welcome back to the mom room. Did you notice I have a total set change? I'm actually in my room, the mom room.
I did notice and I sort of loved it and it calmed me. And then I felt like I shouldn't be wearing red because it didn't work with the color
Oh,
scheme.
do you wish you had a jelly cat too?
I kind of do. I was going to say, can we pretend I'm a guest on the podcast where you do give jelly cats and can I get one?
I know. I should pick out your jelly cat. I'm gonna work on that. It's a skill that I didn't expect to discover about myself, but here we are. So
At the end of the podcast, can you tell me what jelly cat I'd be? I really want to.
it's gonna take me a while
Okay.
because like I sit and I scroll through the Jellycat website and it's like a whole thing and like something will pop up to me and I'm like, like it's like a vibe. So it might take like the rest of the day,
I'm so excited.
but I'll get to it. Don't
You
worry.
will all be alerted
Um,
to who my jelly cat is at some point.
yeah, exactly. Everybody wants to know their Jellycat. Like, and then I thought about it. I'm like, I haven't even done my own.
Ooh, I could take that on.
Like me and Ariana need to know our Jellycats.
I feel like I might take that on. I'll give it back.
Okay.
I'll pay it forward.
Okay, yeah. Scroll the website and you let me know your thoughts. Um, anyways, this episode's not about jellycats, even though it could be. So a while back, it feels like a while back, a show came out on Netflix and everybody was talking about it as they do. It was called Adolescence. You put out a post on the show. I watched the show and I was talking about it on the Mom Room Instagram account a little bit. I was interested mostly because I am interested in the topic of social media and kids and smartphones and kids and just how childhood has changed so drastically because of the internet and social media and smartphones. So I watched it, I had thoughts, and we can get into that afterwards. But you didn't watch the show, but I'm assuming you know what it was about. So explain to me because I was interested. I'm like, oh my God, she didn't watch it. I thought you did. So why didn't you watch it? And also, why don't you think it's important for parents to watch it and why it might actually be detrimental?
So I'm going to contextualize with like everything, it's not good or bad, watch or don't watch. This isn't a commentary on what I'm sure was amazing acting, writing. It is a work of fiction. I'm sure it is a phenomenal work of art. So, if this is awesome enough to reach adolescent writers and producers, this is not at all a comment on that. It is a work of art.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't watch it because I believe, and this is probably going to relate to our whole chat, that as a society, we've really gone far away from checking in with ourselves and what makes us feel safe and doesn't feel safe. We've
Mm.
become really good at doing what everyone else does sometimes. And we are also, I think, as a culture, kind of addicted to dysregulation at this point, to our
Yeah, what
nervous
does that
systems.
mean?
I'll explain it. So
Okay.
really to our nervous systems being hijacked. I mean, since the pandemic in particular, right? We have been in a stress response, fight, flight, freeze eventually, which is kind of when we burn out. And what might feel almost familiar to our nervous system, like I know what this is. I'm always here. I'm always stressed. I'm always overwhelmed, right? That already started with hustle culture and go, go, go and do, do, do. And we're so used to being there that some of us consume more to stay there because it's
Mm-hmm.
familiar to our nervous system. And we're not even realizing it's not what we need. We're not even asking ourselves the question, what do I need right now? What feels safe in my body right now? Some of us don't even know what safe in our body feels like. So I didn't watch the show because in asking myself that, it definitely was not what I needed. Not because it's not a crucial fiction portrayal of some really important topics we should be talking about, but actually because it is a crucial portrayal of topics we need to be talking about, not necessarily watching. So for some of
Mm.
us, watching is going to disempower us. It's going to make us feel overwhelmed, helpless, scared, which is what I was starting to hear from all my friends and my patients. Like people were in horror, like, oh my God, that's not necessarily putting us into a place of action, of what do we need to do, of conversation, of connection. It's actually putting a lot of us in a trauma response. And
Mm-hmm.
so for some people, it won't do that. For some people, it actually might really encourage them to think and to talk and to communicate and to do what we're about to do right now. And that's fantastic. But for some people, it's not going to do that. And
Yeah.
those people need to not feel like watching this is what's going to propel them to change or to connecting with their children. When I saw in the UK, for example, using the show in classrooms, that's not a great model unless we're really making sure we're processing what children are going to watch. They're still kids. So if they're going to watch the show, what are we doing with that? Or are we expecting them to be able to understand it and make sense of it and make meaning of it themselves? Because that's overwhelming them with information and with sometimes shame that they won't actually know what to do with.
I'm surprised they showed that in
I think
schools.
there was discussion around it becoming something to show in
Okay.
schools. And I have concerns about that, which, is a whole other discussion, but it is based in what I'm essentially saying. How do we handle these topics? And I don't know that we can handle these topics only through watching and consuming. The other piece that's really important is all of us process information that is difficult information differently. But for many, many, many people, visual information is really hard to unsee. And vicarious sort of traumatization, feeling scared and actually replaying those images and them taking on a life of their own in your mind can happen. I remember as a child, I was a child of parents who were very dedicated to human rights. The news was always on. I think my father's face like might have even been glued to the actual television set. Growing up, I literally thought that he couldn't see until I realized that no, he was, perpetually in action mode, fix it mode, saving the world mode. He was literally like actually almost glued, holding the television in urgency. Like there was stuff to do. But as a kid, I was seeing things I shouldn't see. It was on all the time.
Mm.
I was holding memories of visuals that I didn't understand. And so we have to kind of toggle this space of what we're exposing ourselves to. And is that helping us? Is that what's going to propel us forward to make the shifts we need to make? Or is that actually going to destabilize us, dysregulate us, make us feel frozen, like in shock and horror? Because then that's not the way. Then you shouldn't be necessarily watching this. Maybe you're reading, maybe you're talking to people, but the show isn't doing it for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I watched it. And immediately afterwards, I was thinking about it, like what it did for me, and just like, okay, like what do I do now? And I really did find, and I think I reviewed it on the podcast shortly after I watched it. And one of my big takeaways was that it was very surface level. And at no point did you see like relationships between people and maybe like what had gone wrong and what was missing in his life versus um relationships at school. Like it was more so like telling a story after the fact because he is in the police station talking to various people in a room, but there's no, like, I almost wish they would have reversed it and like told the story from the beginning to the end as opposed to just like something happened and now he's just in the police station talking.
Knowing
I
what you're
wanted to see
touching
like,
on, you wanted to see context, right? And actually,
yes,
that
like what
really
happened.
matters. It left people with more questions and answers. And I think
Yes.
fear, because from what I understand, and I didn't watch it, and so for all the people who are going to write, but she didn't watch it. You're right. So like let's skip that. I didn't. And I might watch it and have a totally different viewpoint. And maybe we can do a second podcast after I do. but we're going to talk about it from context and from what the show I think was trying to speak to, and
Hmm.
now trying to empower people with that information without needing to watch it necessarily. And so that's what I think we're going to do. What that is understanding, what are we supposed to be doing in our homes? What are actually the risk factors that lead children to what actually happens in this show? Because a lot of people were left with more questions and fears. Wait, he looked like he was in a good home, so what happened there? And so that's actually what we need to talk about, because
Hmm.
leaving people in fear is not necessarily helping. Like I said, it's putting people in a terror state. And so we want to actually think about some of the really important themes in this show that they are, without watching, speaking to, which is this sort of toxic masculinity, which is Lost Boys of Neverland, but the real one, and how they are not belonging, and that boys are not getting spaces to connect, and that there is a real problem in our culture around the choices boys are almost given from their families on a personal level, culturally, socially, where they are either needing to be, tough up, man up, whatever that even means, or they are kind of put in a category of, I'll spell it instead of using the word, and it's awful in and of itself, of being a PUSSY. Now, that's
Mm.
a real problem. Like that they have to exist in this category where they have to stunt their emotional needs because that's seen as weak. So the show is speaking to this on a broader level. And then when we feel a sense of non-belonging, where do we find it? And sometimes that's in this whole concept of manosphere, which is alluded to, I understand, in the show without actually speaking to it specifically. If we have no place to go, where are we going to go? Where are we going to find belonging? So if we're not giving it to our boys, and by the way, our girls, they're going to seek it elsewhere. And so I think that's what we need to be talking about, this fundamental need for connection and belonging, this attachment science that you and I
Hmm.
always talk about. How do we create that? How do we create a sense of self-worth? How do we create connection and belonging so that it doesn't make our children need to seek it out in parasocial relationships and online?
Can you just give like a little Cole's Notes version of what toxic masculinity is? I feel like it's one of those things that it's a term that is used all the time, but I don't know if everyone, like, I have an idea of what it means,
I don't
but
even like
like,
the term. Like, even it came out of my mouth and I was like, why did I say that? And now we
why
can't
did you say
edit it
that?
out because Renee asked me a question about it. Um, Honestly, in and of itself, it's a harsh term. It's a not a good term because we're still categorizing then masculine, feminine. And I,
Hmm.
I don't even want to do that. I did do it, but I don't, because that's actually part of the problem. So maybe a reframe of it is just, we are putting on boys that there is a version of masculinity, and sometimes that's a toxic version. And I think what tends to go in that category is also misogyny, right? And
Hmm.
so we are talking about that, and I use the man up, but it's boys don't cry. It's um the be a man language, it's the tough upper lip, it's an inability to be vulnerable, really, to be authentic, to be connected not only to other people in warmth and relationships between people, but also with oneself. Like it's a distancing in many ways, right? It's a funny, jokey, but not ever emotionally vulnerable. Like that is in some way dangerous or looked down upon. I think that's kind of
Hmm.
what we're talking about. But again, I'd love to take it away from this language of masculine versus feminine and more just talk about all children, all people have a right. Emotional health is a right to be connected to emotional vulnerability. That is a strength.
So it's so funny. When you were just talking, I was thinking about us on Sunday. Pri and I brought Milo to go see Stitch, the new Stitch movie, and I was not expecting this at all. It was so cute. It was so good. But at the end, did you see it?
And loved it.
Yeah. Oh my God, it was so good. Like that story is incredible.
My new line whenever like somebody yells or acts out, whether it's any of my three kids or myself, um, I always say now, and it makes everybody laugh and everything is better. And I just basically say, we are small and we are broken, but we are still good. And then everyone's just like, fine, and we're fine. That's the repair.
My God, I know he's so cute. Anyways, when he was at the bottom of the ocean, I'm sorry, I
Bald.
lost my damn mind. Like, I was inconsolable, bawling my eyes out. And Milo kept looking over at me and he was like, Mommy, Mommy, at first he thought it was funny. He was like, Why are you being a crybaby? You're such a crybaby. And then he was like, trying to assure me that Stitch is going to end up staying with the family. Like, he wanted me to know, like, he's going to be okay. Like, you don't have to cry. And I'm like, I know that, but it's still making me emotional. Like, I'm just sad, you know? And then on the car ride home, every once in a while, I would start tearing up again. And Milo thought it was funny. And he said something about crying, how, like, don't cry, like, something like that. And I was like, it's okay to cry. Like, crying is not a bad thing. And he goes, yes, it is. And I was like, oh my God, why?
And it's
And it's
so hard, right?
when
Like, how did he get that? Right. That's
I know, because when I think about like a few years ago, he was totally fine with like if he got hurt, he would start crying and like run to us. But now I find like he gets hurt and he almost tries to like hide it. Like he doesn't want to start crying or say that anything's wrong. And I'm like, frick. So as a parent, how, like, all the things that you were just talking about, obviously it starts small and it starts when they're young. So how do we let them know that it's okay to cry? How do we raise kids that are able to be vulnerable and like maintain a connection with you that's not like they're trying to be cool, you know?
You know, it's so hard because I always speak about the attachment, and I'm going to end there, but actually this time not start there. Because the problem is, and as your example with Milo, it's not just us. Like,
Mm-hmm.
the world hardens them too. Their sport coach and their teachers and the secretaries at the school and their friends.
Mm-hmm.
And so, absolutely foundationally, we need to do it. And we are the gatekeepers. The way I often think about it is my son, I'll actually talk about my son a bit as I answer this. My son is 11 years old and he walks himself to school and home from school now. And I often think of the role of the crossing guard because my 11-year-old son is super capable of walking himself to school, but he's also super not capable.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he's in his head and half the time he's looking at the sky, which is not where the cars are. And he's really able to know that he's supposed to look both ways. And sometimes he does. And most of the time, I hope he does. But the crossing guard is still the one who is reminding him to look both ways. And if not, is still kind of protecting him and keeping him safe, like looking for him. Our children don't develop a frontal lobe, a fully mature frontal lobe, and that seat of judgment. And I'm moving into boundaries for a sec on purpose and regulation until 27 years old. So but also,
Oh my God. I just want to say Shawn Mendes isn't even 27 yet.
which might explain some things. I'm kidding, kidding. We could cut that, Sean. But when we think about their need for us to be internal crossing guards, like, we are still supposed to be the gatekeepers of safety. And we'll get into boundaries later, but really thinking about this, we're constantly shifting, we're toggling between emotional validation, providing emotional safety, which means seeing their feelings, allowing their feelings, and also providing for them a sense of how are we to be safe in this world? What does that mean? What does that look like? And so, being the internal crossing guards, our job is to actually help them feel safe online, all that we're going to talk about, and set boundaries, but it's also to feel safe when their emotions come up, that these are okay, that they're not going to kind of fall apart. But we can't only do that by naming the feeling. We actually have to tell them what to do when these feelings come up. We actually have to help them, and we also have to help them deal with an environment that might not do that. So we actually have to also articulate and name what we see happening sometimes. And it's also incumbent on teachers, principals, administrators to actually begin to allow our boys to have their feelings. We're talking about boys right now, to maybe name their feelings and to help them with them when they're not with us, because they're in school, eventually 8 hours a day, and they're on a sports team and so on. And it doesn't only start with naming and validating the feeling. I see you're sad. It's okay to cry. That's a great script, but there's so much that occurs in the unsaid, in what we're expressing with our facial expressions, with our body language. Do we stiffen when our boy cries? So yeah, of course, the coach going, stop crying, get back out there, is not great for our boy. But it's also, even if there's just a stiffening, they begin to feel it. If friends are mocking and nobody is finding out when they come home, so dialogue at home is super important from really young. How was your day? What happened? Who'd you play with? And as they cry about something that occurred, it is how you respond to it. It is that you can tolerate it, and then that you don't say to them, this isn't a big deal. But it's also in the nonverbal. Is there a communication of, oh no, stop crying? Like that it's making you uncomfortable, that you can't tolerate it, because that is saying this is still not really safe that you're feeling that. And like I said, I'm a mother of a boy and then 2 girls. And I remember when I had my son, from very, very early on, he's definitely, a deep feeling, highly sensitive child. He's a big feeler. And early on, I can't even tell you how many times I would hear sort of these narratives about my kid being formed by other people to me, about his sensitivity. And it always had a tinge, whether it was said or not. It was felt like I better get that out of him. Like he's really sensitive.
Like it's a
It was a
problem.
real problem. And it was a lot of work for, I look back, I'm lucky my son, he still has a life to live, but I'm lucky he's almost turning 12. And this is going to sound super arrogant, but I'm going to say it. And we did something right, because he's still a kid who feels deeply, but he's learned how to hone that. He's learned what to do with it. And so he has learned how to put it into humor when necessary. He's learned to kind of act. He's loves theater. He plays sports and he's quite athletic, but he has a different approach to it when he loses. Like he's not getting angry necessarily. He's upset, and he's allowed to be upset, and we hold space for upset about the loss of his team or whatever it is. And we had to kind of dictate the environments he was in a little bit. Sometimes that was switching schools and teachers, quite literally, friend groups, because it was learning where he was going to be allowed to be him and figure out how to be him in this world without anyone squashing it. And so we often take this on as parents, but it's actually a mass cultural need. We all have to do it. All of us have to be allowing these boys to feel seen in their emotions. And we do that by naming them, for sure. We do that by helping them with that idea that it's okay to talk it out. It's okay to be vulnerable. We can tolerate it. From a very young age, conversations around emotions, people are not comfortable around emotions. But we also have to do that in our kind of unsaid. So sometimes that's reflecting on ourselves. For fathers, what is it like for them when their sons cry? What's it
Okay,
bringing up?
I feel like I'm gonna cry a little bit. So I didn't want to talk about this, but just what you were saying made me think about how, like, my dad passed away in February, and like Milo hasn't cried at all. And he knew that he passed away. Like, my husband had a conversation with him. And then a few weeks later, I brought Milo to my parents' place for the first time since my dad had passed away. And obviously, my dad was like a huge part of us going there. And I felt nervous because like Milo hadn't really talked about it or like cried or anything. And when my husband talked to him, my husband just said he was kind of like, oh, okay. Okay. Like, he knew that he was sick, and I guess he didn't really have a response. And so when we pulled into the driveway, I said, because I was a little bit upset, and I said, Papa's not going to be here this weekend because, Papa passed away. And he was like, I know. Like, that's all he really said. And then he looked outside and my dad's truck was still in the driveway. And he said, well, that's Papa's truck, though. Like, why is Papa's truck here? And I was like, oh, Dan, like, my grandpa is going to keep Papa's truck. And I think Dan is here right now. And then he just asked, like, Mommy, why are you crying? And I was like, well, because I miss Papa. Like, Mommy's upset. And so, like, it's hard as a parent. And I think a lot of parents will relate to this in, like, because we've had conversations about this before. And you were like, you want to kind of bring it up and let him process it. And I know you told us about, like, maybe drawing pictures of, like, memories or looking at photos. And I have this, like, double, like, this cognitive dissonance of, like, I want him to be upset and to cry, but then at the same time I'm like, I don't want to cause issues if there's nothing there. So, like, what, and I know a lot of people have asked me to do an episode on grief and, like, kids and people passing away. So what in that situation, like, should I be concerned that he's not having emotions about that?
So we should do an episode on grief.
Yes.
And I haven't, like, on live footage, had an ability to say sorry around your loss of your dad. And
Thank you.
I actually think there's probably more reasons than just Milo that it made you think of him. And maybe it was part of how he was able to create, I know it without even knowing it, space for you to have emotional vulnerability. So there was something in him, as we're talking about boys and men, that allowed that. And when we talk about how someone allows that, it doesn't always mean tears, right? It's not always crying. It's sometimes authentic connection. It's sometimes just capacity to look inward and be honest with what's there. And sometimes it's not tears. And so at a developmentally appropriate level, linking to Milo, what might be authentic might be this kind of confusion and uncertainty. His ability to say, but wait, Papa's car's here, is actually a connection to what's going on with him. He's telling you, I am having feelings about this, but it's not sad yet. It's almost, I'm at the stage of, like, confusion, which is a stage of grief. Like, did this happen? Especially in a kid, I don't fully understand it yet.
Yeah.
And so,
sometimes I even feel like that right now.
right? And so
like, it doesn't make sense in my head.
Exactly. And so what a stage that is, right? To say back to him, like, I get it, buddy. Like, so he's so alive here still. We still feel him. He's so part of our family. It makes no sense to understand that he's not here anymore. I totally believe you. That happens to me. I pull out my phone and I remember I can't call. It happens to me too. And so we sometimes have to think of emotional vulnerability and authenticity is not always tears. It's the full gamut of emotion. It's being allowed to explore what emotion we're actually feeling, learning what they're called, learning what to do about them. And very often it's learning that they don't have to be pushed away or held in. And so for kids, one of the reasons why would we draw, memories of Papa? Or why would we talk to him about, yeah, you're confused, his truck is here? Because sometimes by bringing up ways to be playful with or move through emotion, other emotions can come. So it might be that in the space of drawing or in the space of talking about how confusing it is, sadness does come because a heartbreak is there. It is at the core of it. He may not be there yet. It may not come. It's not concerning that he's not. What we're talking about is creating the space for it. And that goes to your second question, which is, but sometimes I'm afraid, like, I don't want to put what isn't there. I think that is the most common concern parents have. When our children go through hard times, when we suspect hard times, but they seem okay,
you don't want to bring it up. Like, you're like, yeah.
That's never true. We always make it safer. Always. by naming it. They'll pick it up or not. We have to follow their lead. So there's a therapy for young children called Wait, Watch, and Wonder. And I think it's really a parenting approach. It's, waiting, watching, and wondering. It is looking at our children and letting them tell us what they need, reading their faces. It's my son coming home and doing his homework in his room when he normally does it in the kitchen, and saying, "Hey, bud, everything okay? How was your day?" But naming why I think that. Usually you do your homework in the kitchen. Maybe he then is like, "Can you just leave me alone?" And now there's agitation that's not normally there. Okay. Now I could be like, "Don't talk to me like that." And I've just shut down the whole thing. Or I can think in my head like there's something going on, but it might not come out now. Like the agitation's high. So maybe I say something like, "Okay, can I bring you a snack? It's your room." If that's not your thing and you only eat in the kitchen, like skip that part. Let's, whatever, you catch the drift. And maybe at bedtime when he's done his homework and it's just the two of you, you carve out the time for connection again. And you point out this sort of string of behaviors, because behavior is communication, where you say, "Something's up and I feel it. And I just want you to know you're always safe to tell me anything. I won't be mad. I won't, whatever it is. And when you're ready." And if we keep making that space, maybe it unfolds. If we don't, our children make up their own stories. And so that's part of where we sometimes get lost. Like, okay, but they know I'm there, do they? If we don't keep reminding them that this topic is okay to talk about, do they start to think that it's not? We think, of course you can talk to me about Papa whenever you want. But we actually have to understand that our children don't always understand or know that. We have to continue to give them the space, and they will be very clear if it's not the time. And we do respect and follow their lead. Do you want to draw a picture of a memory? Do you want to look at pictures? How did it feel to be at the house without Papa? We name the specific questions. They may or may not answer us. They may or may not want to engage, but we continue to let them know that it's okay to engage here, because you may be surprised when they just decide to, when it just starts to calibrate within them, and it becomes like, okay, I can do that now. And even if it never does, or it doesn't, for a year, parents are always surprised when at some point they come and they say something and you're like, "Wait, all that was inside you? I didn't even know it was there." But the reason why it's there, why they were able to eventually tell you or say something, was probably because you kept kind of planting the seed that was safe for them to think about it. Because part of what happens is the story we might decide is it's not even safe for me to think about whatever I'm thinking, to feel whatever I'm feeling, even in the quiet. And so what we see when we go back to what's toxic masculinity is sometimes like a really exiled part of yourself. Like you have stopped even letting yourself think about emotional things. You grow up and start to not even do that. You just push it away because it's not even safe to explore it at all. That's much harder when I sit across from a 45-year-old guy who's talking to me about scrolling Instagram and gaming all day, to ask him, what do you think that's doing for you? Much harder for him to figure it out than it is when we're constantly talking and allowing our child to know it's safe for them to go inside.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And so for parents, because one of the things that we were going to talk about today is, and I'll bring it back to the show Adolescence, a lot of people were surprised because, oh, he was such a normal kid and he had a good home life and so on and so forth. It looked like he had friends at school. And what are signs that parents should look out for that would like alert them to perhaps something is not right or your child is struggling?
So what's interesting is that the signs might look like sometimes what we call boys being boys, which is what starts to be the problem. Now, temperament plays a role here. Boys are definitely often more active, more energetic. Rough and tumble play becomes part of it. Jumping off walls. My son, like, quite literally actually climbs the walls, a leg on each side and a hand on each side. Like,
Spider-Man.
So there is an element of kind of physicality. However, we need to know their baseline. It goes back to the watching and waiting. Like when we start to see, I remember I was working with a boy who lost his father, and on the hockey on the ice, like he would start to slash kids with the stick. And this is often where we see, even we can talk about bullying also. And I know in the show it was actually he was bullied by a girl, but even
Mm,
her, like it's the same question. So you're not born a bully.
yeah.
What
And that's
there's a
where
wound.
that's where I wanted more from the show. I was like, okay, like what's
And
going on
hopefully
here?
they'll
Like I
do
want to know
that.
the details.
Hopefully they'll do that in season 2, right? Because this
Yeah.
idea is there's a wound there. And so acting out behavior is a really big sign. In even in 3 and 4 year olds, parents will come to me with a bad kid who's biting. It's not a bad kid. Is biting developmentally appropriate? I mean, trying it on for size, yeah. But if they're biting kind of frequently at school and hitting frequently at school, no, we something's going on. That doesn't mean something going on doesn't mean a pathology. It doesn't mean a label. It doesn't mean a
Mm,
diagnosis. It means they're trying to communicate something and we're not
uh-huh.
getting it. I remember
And
when,
so I just want to say, like, when something like that does come up, would you say that the most common response from parents is like just anger towards their kids?
yeah,
Like
and
to stop,
or
as opposed to
shame.
trying to
Yes.
communicate
Yeah.
like a bigger
And
problem?
I don't blame the parent here either, right? It's they feel a pressure. They
Yeah.
feel a shame that they're failing. And so their sense of I'm failing, remember it's not always what we even say, is in the house, is it, and the child then feels like they're bad and they're failing. But that's probably going to be like a volume controller at increasing the behavior because now they feel like they're bad. And we start to have stories about ourselves. I'm bad. Well, I might as well act bad. Now, they don't think that like that with that clarity, but they just start to act that way. That becomes a story they have. And the parent might not even be saying it. They might just be feeling it because they're worried and stressed about what's wrong with their kid. And they keep being like, you know, Damien, stop biting. You can't bite. And so the kid's like, I can't stop. I don't know why I bite. Right. And they're not saying that. They're just getting in trouble and they start to feel like they're bad. And I remember when I worked in inpatient psychiatry with kids, hospitalized children, these children were diagnosed with diagnoses you don't even diagnose kids with, bipolar disorder. And they were hitting and punching and behaving in externalizing ways, acting out ways. And when I would read their file, it was, 7 foster care homes, and mother
Mm,
died 3 months later from a coke addiction. And they were wounded boys. They were so hurt. And at the core of all of it was so much heartbreak. And so, what are we looking for? One is this acting out, but it's knowing there's like a vulnerability, but maybe they're not feeling safe to be vulnerable. And it's so much easier to peel the layers when they're younger than it is when they're older. So we need to make the space to peel the layers. We need to listen more than talk. What's going on? Pay attention. Keep finding ways to let them know that you are listening. The other is withdrawal, which can be similar. So the kid who doesn't go towards acting out, my son temperamentally doesn't go to acting out. He's a highly sensitive kid, but he definitely goes towards withdrawal. So homework in his room will definitely be the way I'll see a sign. He will not be with us. That matters because at the core, so often I hear parents being like, he doesn't want to be with us. That's not true. If you're listening to this podcast and your kid doesn't want to be with you, this is adolescence without watching it, I know. He does want to be with you. He deeply wants to know he matters. He deeply wants connection. He doesn't know how to say it. He feels like his needs are too much, but he does not want to be with you. Connection is as basic a need as food, shelter, and water. We all want it. So withdrawal is a sign. And then you might see other regressive behaviors, peeing, peeing in their bed, or having an accident at school, not before they're toilet trained. Once
right.
they're toilet trained, and quite stable at toilet trained. So a regression, eating regression, they're not really eating. So you will see it again in sort of behaviors, withdrawal, acting out, and regressive sort of behaviors like that. Those are some of the main ways we might see it.
Would you say, and I'm just curious, as kids are going into the preteen, like 13, 14 kind of age, is it common for them to, because when I think about that, I haven't experienced it yet. Obviously, Milo is 6, but I think about kids starting to like pull away from their parents and, wanting to do things on their own and like spending more time in their room. And would you say that that is a stereotype and not all kids act that way, and not all parents feel like they lose their children once they become a preteen or 13, 14?
I think it's a little bit of A and a little bit of B. And when we started, I said everything we're going to talk about is both and. It's not everyone shouldn't watch a show, right? It's not kids should always want to be with you and never want to be without you. It's a little bit of, and this is what gets so hard, the nuance. We really want it to be categorical, but sometimes it's less what they say and what they do, just like it's less of what we say and what we do and how it feels. So how does it feel when they're going to their room? Are they, the energy is positive and they're going to their room and they're chatting with their friend on text, which we'll get to, and you can feel they're fine. Like, no, I don't want to be with you, Mom. Like, they grab popcorn as they go upstairs and they're like, what are we having for dinner? Okay, bye. And they run upstairs. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. This is a stage of development where social matters more. I'm going to play basketball with my friend in the laneway basketball, and no, I don't want to play a board game with you, Mom. Super developmentally appropriate, but there's a flavor that is not that. That's pulling away. That's withdrawal. Withdrawal doesn't look like I don't want to be with you, I want to be with my friends. You feel something's wrong in that withdrawal, but you decide to give them space. Yeah, that's the one I'm talking.
I love how you said like it feels different. That's such a good,
We've been distanced from our intuition, right?
Yeah. And I feel like as a parent, and like earlier you said, what was their baseline? So if you have this bubbly 10, 11, 12-year-old, and then all of a sudden they start high school and it's a switch, that should be a signal that, okay, like what's going on?
My son loves to be alone. He loves to build like Lego and robotics and 3D printers, and he's super creative and kind of needs his space. But there's an energy. He's also the smiliest kid. Everybody kind of would say that, who is he? He's this like goofy, smiley kid who, as I said, crosses the street and staring at the sky. Like, so when that is not how it feels heavy and he's in his room playing Lego. You feel it. It's like everybody forgets that, you walk in and you speak to a server at a restaurant and you're like, oh, you feel an energy, something's wrong. We feel, and we got so pulled in, and this moves to like, how do we parent this? And we're so looking outside of ourselves, right? At the book that's going to tell us, at the TV show that's going to tell us, but it's inside us. Like your barometer of if your kid is okay is in you. You have to listen to that. So if we're looking for the right script to say when they go to their bedroom, we're going to mess it up because it's not out there. It's in you to know what to say. And so when you're sitting with Milo and he's not crying, that he's sort of making sense of this and processing that. You trust that. That doesn't mean that it's wrong, but that you would know. You have to also trust then that you would know if he was struggling and he needed to talk about it, you would know, you would feel it. Something's weighing on him. And that's still not wrong. Our children will have times where things are weighing on them and they're not coming to us. That will happen. You've not failed as a parent. It will happen. I'm telling everybody, your kid won't come to you one day and you'll know something's wrong. But that's when you let them know you know. And you make the space.
I didn't tell you before that I went to the park a few weekends ago and I was so upset when I left the park because it was like the holiday Monday or something, like not too long ago. And the park was so busy, and there was all these parents everywhere and all these little kids playing on the park. And Milo was there, and my husband, and these two kids who are like 10 or 11. I told the story already on the podcast, but just the Coles notes is like they show up at the park with their big metal scooters, and they're jumping up on the slide, and there's little kids going down. They're falling all over the place, like doing trick jumps all over the park. And all the parents, I could tell, were like, what are these kids doing? Like, this is dangerous, first of all. They're ruining the park. Like, one of the little log things was like starting to crack. Nobody was saying anything. And there was a little girl next to them, and they fell down during one of their jumps or whatever. And she giggled. She was probably like 4. And the kid looks at her and goes, why are you laughing? Like you could do any better. And then they made a comment about her ethnicity. I lost my mind. Like, I stood up and I went over to them, and none of the parents said anything, even though they had the little kids that were like, you know, in danger. And I finally said something to them, and the way they wouldn't even look me in the eyes, and they were just going like, yeah, okay, like that. And I said, like, guys, you shouldn't be at the park. Like, this isn't a skate park. There's little kids everywhere. Like, leave. Not listening. So I sat on the log where they were doing the jumps, and I was just having my coffee on the log. And then so they like took off and went somewhere else. But like, that made me so upset, because that is only like 4 or 5 years maybe from where Milo is right now. And I remember thinking like, oh my God, I hope Milo is not like, doesn't have that personality. You hear about kids being not nice, but I've never seen it. And I've never seen a kid that was that young be that, like, making racist comments, like not listening to any of the adults. Like, because a dad ended up telling them too one time. He was like, you guys got to get out of here. Like, this is dangerous. It's not a skate park. And they're just completely ignoring, like, anyways, I remember thinking like, this is scary, because it's not far away from where Milo is, and these kids just like had zero respect for adults. Like, anyways, I was shocked, and it kind of like rocked me a little bit, because it just made me nervous.
Well, in some ways, this story kind of brings us back to adolescence. How do I prevent my kid to insert the blanks? What makes my child? And, you know, I said a little earlier, a child's not born a bully. A child's not born racist. A child's not born disrespecting. Now, these boys, if by any chance a person who's listening is their parent or is parenting a child like this, child's not bad. We really need to get away from that. The child is needing. The child has figured out to find a sense of belonging in this behavior with peers who've also found belonging in this way of being. This is, quote unquote, what we could have called, and I don't like the term, but we're there, so we're going to use it, toxic masculinity in the making. Tough guy, and we don't care, and they do care. And somewhere in there, they do want connection another way. But this is what they found. This is sort of what's been given to them. This is what's built up and built up and built up by maybe not having a space where their emotional needs were met. You know, boys are born with the right hemisphere, where kind of our amygdala and the seat of our emotions lives, more immature by about a month to girls in development. That's massive. Meaning they're higher need, they're more vulnerable. And yet from very early on, culturally, personally, in most families, they get less. They need more. They get less. We should just start there. And so what we're talking about is this very delicate space between how do we help them? Well, both by validating emotion, making space for their emotions. And this is the one I see not being talked about anywhere, that crossing guard and boundaries. Boundaries are not punishments. So part of what's happened in parenting is we have lost our way with boundaries. Boundaries are understood as punishment. You behave like that, so now those kids can't go out to the park for 3 weeks. That's not a boundary. That's a punishment. That's a consequence. Sometimes it's appropriate, but I'm going to stay away from it for a second. A boundary is teaching our children how to be in this world, being the mature mind that allows and creates safety and knows better than them. And they want that. That has to start really early on. So at age 2, they're not putting their finger in a socket. That's a boundary. When we were growing up at age 5, you could sit in the back seat of a car, maybe not you, I did, and wave at all the other cars. You can't do that anymore because now we have more science that that's not safe. And no parent has trouble going, no, you can't sit in the trunk and wave at other cars. Why? Because you just can't. Not safe. Mm-hmm. So we've lost our way. And when a parent hasn't felt comfortable setting boundaries of just teaching how to be in this world, it will get really hard to do it at 13. So it has to start really young. And that's where the social media discussion comes in. You know, I had another post where I talked about removing Roblox from my kids after I gave Roblox to my kids because I thought it was roadblocks. Yep. I have a PhD. And I thought like they were building roads. I thought it was Minecraft, actually. I had seen Minecraft and I had merged them in my brain because my rule as a psychologist was I play the games first. Well, somehow Roblox and Minecraft, even in this mom who's very busy, and so all the parents listening going, I don't have time. I know. That's what happened to me. Thought they were the same, like different version of the same thing, and assumed it and made an assumption and made a mistake. And one day, my 6-year-old wanted Roblox and my 13-year-old was playing. And I was like, I've never played this thing. And I started to go into this place that is a plethora of available games and is not Tetris and is not building roads at all. And I sat them all down and I said, no more Roblox. From 6-year-old to 13-year-old, mommy's taking it. I made a mistake. I took accountability of my mistake. I said it was my job to keep them safe. I said I messed up and I didn't check it the way I should have. Yep, I'm on like live, news admitting this because I'm a human being. And I pulled back the reins. No, you can't sit in the trunk and wave at cars anymore. I realize you can't do that. I realize it's not safe and it's my job to keep you safe. And you get to be sad and you get to be angry and you get to, but we were playing already, but our friends play. We're not playing. And there's no punishment. It's just no. And it's not no because I don't love you. And it's not no because I can't see your feelings. And so I can still see you're angry and I can still see you're sad. And we can still talk about how we're going to cope with it. So I'm validating, I'm loving, but I'm firm. And so what's happening is we've lost the way. When I hear those kids, it's two things. They need the connection. They need the right to emotional vulnerability. And they need the boundaries.
Yeah. And I find with boundaries, once you start doing it, it's easier. And the kids don't question it. Like we had a Roblox issue. He wanted to play. I didn't realize that some of the kids that he watches on YouTube Kids are playing Roblox. I didn't know that that's what it was, but I guess he figured it out. And so he asked for it one day and I downloaded it. We were sitting together. I downloaded it on the iPad. I made my parental account. I put all the parental settings in place. And then I opened it pretending to be him.
Yeah, that's how you
immediately,
do it, by the way.
Immediately, I was like, no. I'm like, Milo, I'm sorry, you're too young. We're not going to have this game. And think about it. Think about how excited he was because I was downloading it in front of him, setting it all up. We opened it up and I was like, you know what? It's not appropriate for someone your age. When you're older, maybe you can play. And he goes, when I'm 7? I was like, I don't think so.
And this is right. So it's about the importance of setting boundaries. And yes, once you're doing it, they learn it. And so why aren't parents doing it? What is hard? And here's where the compassion for the parent too. And, I always, as a child and adult psychologist, I toggle back and forth. First of all, because it's hard, because it goes back to needing to tolerate their big feelings. It goes back to, is it okay for them to have big feelings? If it's not, setting the boundaries is really hard because then when your 7-year-old boy is crying or your girl or screaming and you don't feel it's okay for the girl to be angry and the boy to be sad or whatever are those stories you carry within, Now you can't validate the emotion. So the quickest road away from that is just don't set the boundary. So
Mm-hmm.
that's one reason. The other reason that I think is deeper is the way we were all parented. Boundaries were my way or the highway. Boundaries were punishment. Boundaries were often harsh. And so parents are trying to overcompensate, and they hear this world of we need to validate their feelings, everything we just talked about. They need to be allowed to have feelings. And so they interpret that. And psychologists have actually played into this. And I talk about this in other settings. We've talked about it too. We played into this. It's a real problem. That doesn't mean no boundaries. And so they mean well. They want their child to be allowed to have their feelings, and then they kind of just overcompensate by not giving a boundary. But children hate having that much power. It's really scary. They need to trust the adults. Their brain's not fully developed yet. They're looking for the people who teach them to remember how to look both ways when you cross the street. They're constantly looking. Those boys in the schoolyard were really happy that you stopped them deep down before they hurt someone. Do they know that? I don't know. But you did. They don't
Mm-hmm.
want so much power. And when, there's a wonderful book, Boy Mom, and she's interviewed boys in this kind of manosphere. I don't even know if I'm saying it right, and incels, and we're not going to get into all that, but she interviews, and what's at the core is the same thing that I saw at the core of the boys that were hospitalized when I worked in inpatient psychiatry, which is this deep need to be seen and this deep need to feel like it was okay to be emotionally vulnerable. And I think what goes along with that is this deep need to feel safe, and knowing that there are adults in your midst who are keeping you safe because you don't know yet what's safe. That is our job.
Adults that take your scooter and throw it in the river. How about that? No, I'm just kidding. Kind
That's
of.
a difference between punishment and boundaries.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay, we are getting to time. So this was amazing. I love it. Of course, I cried when you come on. That's just what we do. It's very on brand for us. So thank you for this conversation. Can you tell people where they can find you online?
Absolutely. You can find me at Dr. Cotler. That's my Instagram handle. drtanyacotler.com. It's my website. And all the things, the workshops, the groups that I offer are all there.
Awesome. Thank
Thank
you.
you.